What would it do to the military profession for the commander-in-chief to call a retired member of the military back to active duty just so he could court-martial them for saying things he didn't like? Now, that is, of course, what Trump is currently trying to do to Democratic Senator Mark Kelly. But this isn't even the first time that question is being posed within a Trump White House, because former Defense Secretary Esper had to deal with this question from the commander-in-chief back in 2020 during Trump's first term. Now, at the time, retired four-star General Stanley McChrystal had called Trump immoral in an interview with ABC News. Admiral William McRaven, who is perhaps best known for overseeing the Navy SEAL raid that killed Osama bin Laden in 2011, wrote in an op-ed that Trump embarrassed us in the eyes of our children, humiliated us on the world stage, and worst of all, divided us as a nation. Now, it turns out Trump really didn't like them saying that, and he reportedly wanted to use his power as commander-in-chief to punish them for it. Sound familiar? Now, according to Trump's own former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, Trump wanted both McChrystal and McRaven brought back to active duty service specifically so he could try to have them court-martialed. Esper claims he and then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, managed to talk Trump out of the idea and avoid a complete disaster. But as Esper put it, if I wasn't there and Milley wasn't there, what would have happened? It seems that we now get to find out. Because rather than having Mark Esper and Mark Milley in the room to act as a guardrail to Trump's worst instincts, now we have former Fox News anchor Pete Hegseth. Again, the thing Trump is so worked up about this time is the video put out by 6 Democratic lawmakers who served in the military or the CIA, reminding our nation's troops that they can and should ignore unlawful orders from their superiors. And now, of those 6, only Senator Mark Kelly retired at a high enough military rank for the military to be able to call him back to active duty without his consent. Yesterday, the Pentagon opened an inquiry into Kelly that could result in exactly that. Hegseth calling Kelly back to active duty so they can try to court-martial him. Now, as for the other 5 lawmakers who are outside of the military's legal jurisdiction, today we learned that the FBI has opened its own investigation looking into all 6 of the lawmakers Trump is so angry with. So with no cooler heads in the room this time around, no people to talk Trump out of just how extreme this all is, where does this all go from here? Joining me now is Glenn Kirshner, former federal prosecutor, former Army JAG prosecutor, and the host of the Justice Matters podcast. I could see you shaking your head as I was just explaining all of that. And I know why. I think we all are. As a former JAG, can you just help us non-lawyer, non-military types understand what is a court-martial? How would that work? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, Jen, a court-martial is not that different from a prosecution in federal court. For example, in federal practice, you have the federal rules of evidence. In a court-martial, you have the military rules of evidence, but they track almost exactly, including they use the same numbers. So you have jury trials in the military. We call them panel trials. But really, it's kind of indistinguishable. I have always said that when people see from the inside the military criminal justice system, it is very protective of a defendant's right. We call them the accused, not the defendant. But you have a robust bucket of rights, just like you would in federal court, due process, all constitutional rights. What is different is there are some unique military offenses, like AWOL, absence without leave. You know, if you don't go to your job, you're not going to be prosecuted for AWOL, right? But if you leave the military without permission, that's a criminal offense. Disobeying lawful orders, which is, you know, what we are talking about now. So it's more similar than it is different. But what I see is Donald Trump abusing his power as commander-in-chief in the military setting by basically insisting that a court-martial be contemplated, a military investigation be instituted against Mark Kelly, Senator Mark Kelly, or that the FBI begin investigating the other members of Congress who made that public service announcement video that was nothing more than announcing heartland military law principles.
You made this so poignant point to me before we came on the air, which is just that if members of the military, if they carry out unlawful orders, which is basically what these 6 members were telling him what not to do, they could be court-martialed. They could be in trouble for doing that, even though they could be abiding by what a commander-in-chief in this current situation is telling them to do.
Yeah, let's be real clear. I was, first, it was drilled into my head at officer basic training at what was Fort Bragg, is again Fort Bragg, and then again at the Army's JAG school, where they teach us how to be military lawyers, drilled into our heads. You must obey lawful orders, but you must disobey unlawful orders. And when you have these 6 members of Congress simply stating what the military law, what the manual for courts martial says, and they're going to be criminally investigated for it, there is no adequate predication. There's no evidence warranting an investigation. But as you were saying, Jen, if a soldier or a sailor or a seaman or an airman obeys an unlawful order, they could be court-martialed. They could be dishonorably discharged. They could be imprisoned at Fort Leavenworth. And the standard for that type of an issue to be litigated is whether they knew it was unlawful or they should have known. How about we don't put our military members in that trick bag? But, you know, here we are.
Let me ask you, I mean, it seems, obviously, many people are overstepping their power here, it feels like. The FBI investigating these 5 members. You have even the push, even the Department of Defense potentially considering a Trump order to court-martial. What do you think, as a lawyer, what do you think the consequences should be for people who are abiding by following these steps from the commander-in-chief when they seem to be complete overreaches of power?
They're following unlawful commands from Donald Trump. And if you're committing offenses and your defense is going to be, I was just following orders, you know, that didn't work out so well at Nuremberg. It certainly didn't work out so well for Lieutenant Calley when he, you know, engaged in mass murder, the My Lai massacre. And, you know, Pete Hegseth just doing whatever Donald Trump tells him to do, like initiating a criminal investigation that could result in a court-martial of Senator Kelly for simply stating accurately what the military law provides, or Kash Patel's FBI opening criminal probes of members of Congress for speaking the truth. You know, that is something that will someday, when the rule of law comes back into the light of day, will have to be tackled. They'll have to be held accountable for those abuses.
It's going to be accounting for all of this and remembering all of it. Glenn Kirshner, thank you so much for being here, helping make sense or explain a lot of this to us. Really appreciate it.